Hello and welcome to ERPWebTutor.com. This is Arideep, and in this video we are going to do an introduction session to Oracle Alerts. So first of all, let's try to understand what is an alert. So it is basically an exception control solution from Oracle. Okay, so it is a feature to monitor critical or unusual activity in the database. So it's when the word database comes, it's not just related to a DBA or a backend or a technical stuff. It is actually everything that you do in the front end, it actually hits the database. So even a front end transaction could be an unusual activity. So we will explain that in the examples and as we go through the different slides. So basically it is a feature to monitor, so you can monitor any critical or unusual transactions that are happening. So that is basically the functionality of an alert. So some of the examples would be you can monitor table spaces. Now this is something that would be useful for the DBAs. So you can you don't have to worry about checking the database, the table spaces every day. You can have an alert, alert you when something happens or when it is at the threshold for the table space. So that is one example that is useful for one team, which is a DBA team. The next example, when you have an unusually high amount in an invoice. So you can build an alert that will tell you that a very high amount of an invoice has been entered. So you can build an alert for that. Also, another popular example that is often used by a lot of companies who implement, this is an HR side. So the invoice is a finance module, right? So we can see that it is useful for the DBAs to monitor table spaces. It can be used in the finance module to track a very high amount in an invoice, and also identify end of probation periods for employees, which is an HR functionality. So alerts can be used for database purpose, and it can also be used from any module. Okay, so let's move on. So why we just not use report instead, right? So we can build the report. Now if it's a report, these are some of the reasons why I feel that I would personally not use alert, or I would not recommend report to a client when such unusual activities happen. You don't want to report, it actually doesn't create that attention that might be required for such cases. Also, the report is kind of, the users run it every day. So even though there is something which is not an alarming thing that is happening in the database, you still have a report. You just have to go through the report to see if anything is unusual in the data set. Now also it requires a lot more development activity than an alert. You need to do a lot of things. You need to build, you need to write program. If you're using Oracle reports, you need to build a report. If you're using XML publisher, you have to build an XML publisher. You have to build a template. So it actually involves quite a lot of development activity compared to an alert, because the purpose is simple. If something unusual happens, I just need to be notified in some form. Okay, so instead of a report, an alert is more useful in this kind of thing. Also, going through the report could be a time-consuming activity. So that's why I would recommend that for tracking these kind of events, an alert is a better solution than a report. Okay, so now the next slide. So we will talk about how it really works, the alerts. So as you can see here, that we have certain documents. It can be, this is an example from the finance side. So there are documents, let's say that could be invoices, and you see that an invoice is extremely high, and that is basically an important or an unusual or a critical activity. Okay, now another example could be like, a high paying employee is terminated, or a high profile employee is terminated. Okay, so that is an unusual activity. Okay, an important activity is to notify HR for for alerting them about somebody's probation period coming to an end. That is an important activity. Critical activity could be that the table space reaching its max. So the DBAs need to purge something, they need to increase the table space. So that is a critical activity. So basically, from the database, we can identify an important, unusual, or a critical activity, and then those activity we can build into an action and into a condition that will check. So for example, we put a threshold of the database size. So that is my condition. If the table space grows beyond that threshold, that means the table space is greater than, which is my condition, then I'm going to take some action. Okay, so that is basically how the alert process actually work. Okay, so now the type of alerts. Okay, so there are two types of alerts. One is event-based alert, and the other one is periodic alerts. Okay, so some of the examples, I will just talk through the examples. So let's say an email goes out as soon as an employee is hired into the system. Okay, to a benefits team. Okay, so if the company the benefits team need to know that any new employee has been hired, so they need to perform some actions. So that is an example of an event-based alert. So as soon as the event occurs, a notification, which is the most common way of informing the employees within the organization, that is the most heavily used method. So it notifies a group or an individual of an event, and that event could be a new hire. And then the periodic alerts, it could be a list of employees whose probation period is coming to an end in the next 30 days. Okay, so depending on that occurrence, the HR needs to do something, whether this person will be hired permanently or this person will not be hired. So what you can do is you can define some periodic schedules, and this alert will check that whoever is reaching 30 days, and then will notify whoever needs to know that information. Okay, so those are the two types of alerts and the examples that I gave you. You can have all different kinds of examples. Like in the previous example, what we showed that when an invoice is unusually high, so that is not a periodic thing, right? That is an event. So when somebody enters an invoice, let's say greater than $10,000, then that is an event. Okay, and when that happens, then you will fire your event-based, or your event-based alert will be triggered, and then some action will happen. It can be an email, it can be a concurrent program, it can be a SQL statement. All kind of things can happen. Okay, so let's move forward. Now we will talk a little bit about the triggering event. So basically, in the triggering event, let's say when a new user is created, right? So that is a triggering event. Now what is happening here? An event has happened. An event is nothing but an update or an insert into a specific table. So in this example that I gave you, so a new user is created. So what happens when a new user is created in the system? There is a table called FND underscore users. A record gets inserted into the table. So I can define an event-based alert when an insert happens into the FND users table. So that will, my condition will evaluate that. Oh, there has been a new insert. Okay, that is, I'm trying to catch the exception, and then based on that, I'm going to take an action, which could be an email. Okay. Now, the periodic event or the periodic alert, the triggering event, basically that does not the periodic alerts are not triggered as soon as the event happens. Okay, the periodic alerts are run on a schedule basis. So you can define a periodic alert and you can set it to run on a schedule. So let's say daily or say monthly. So all those kind of schedules that you can set. So it's basically a time-based alert. Okay, so you can also run this on demand. So let's say the program or the alert is supposed to check, say, every morning, but you can always run on demand. So you can run anytime during the day if you need to. So let's say you lost your email. So you ask somebody, whoever has access to the responsibility called alert manager, to run this thing on demand. And then it will also do the same thing. If whatever criteria was met at 6 in the morning, the same criteria will be met the same day, 2 hours later, depending on what time zone. So if there's a time factor, but usually you will get the same result set. So you can run that on demand and get the output, and it can be the action will be performed. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide, which is about alert actions. So we have talked about all kinds of alerts. Now, what are the different alert actions? Now, I've already mentioned about emails. So you can see that once the condition is met, we have an action. Okay, so the action, what kind of action? Sending an email. It could be running a concurrent program. It could be an operating system program or just a SQL script. Okay. So we will see some of these things when we see this thing in the application itself. But basically, these are the different kind of actions that can be performed using alerts. Now, action sets. Okay, so that's the next thing that we will talk about. So that makes you decide whether one action or multiple action. You can basically group multiple actions into something called an action set. And then based on the condition being met, I can send one email, and then I can run a concurrent program. I can define two different actions and then consolidate them into an action set. Okay, so after we have talked about action set, let's try to understand the condition. So we have mentioned in all those images that you are seeing, you have seen a decision box called conditions. Okay, now conditions, like what and how. Okay, how does the condition is evaluated? So that is basically a SQL statement. It's a select statement. Now, if you are a non-technical person, you're a functional consultant with really no background in Oracle technical, you don't need to worry, because we are not trying to write very complex SQL statement. These are very basic and simple SQL statements, involving 3 or 4 tables, and that kind of SQL writing skill, if you are working in Oracle applications for some time, you should develop that SQL writing skills, because these are not PL SQL procedures. These are very basic SQL statements that gets executed, and this select statement will actually evaluate a condition. So again, in the example that we talked about, like let's say the probation period, right? So ending in 30 days. So whichever employee's probation period ends in 30 days. So you can write a basic query between involving the per all people F, which is the employee table, and then you have per all assignments F, which is the assignment table, which actually has a field called the probation end date. Okay, or in this example, you can see that it's a very simple select statement. You can look the invoice number from AP invoices all, which holds all the invoices, where amount is greater than 200. Okay, that is my condition. Amount is greater than 200. So as that criteria is met, that means the condition evaluates to be true, and it also retrieves all the values, right? So if there are multiple invoices, this select statement is going to fetch all the invoice numbers from this table with the amount greater than 200. So that is basically how a condition is created. Now, if you are working in Oracle apps, there's a very easy way to find out, which table stores what information. So you can directly go to your help and record history, and then that will tell you which table this information is being pulled from. Also, if you go to your help and diagnostics, I believe, or like just record, you can also get the field name of that field that you're particularly looking for. So for example, if you just highlight on the first name of the employee, and then you go to help, and then you can easily find out that what table column it is being pulled from. So it is very basic. It's we can if you just practice it for some time, it will be very easy for you to write these kind of basic SQL statements. Okay, so this is basically how conditions are created. So next we move on to the record count. Okay, now the condition evaluates some select statement and it returns a count. Okay, now if the count is greater than 0, that means it is an exception. Okay, then we are trying to report that exception in the form of an action. So this record, the records retrieved greater than 0 indicates that the query has found some exceptions. I mean, don't get confused by the word exceptions. It's just the exception that you are trying to catch. Okay, it's just we are using the word exception in that sense. So something that you want to report. So that exception is met, the records retrieved greater than 0, and then you're going to perform some actions. Okay, so now we have talked about actions, we have talked about conditions. Now let's talk about action level. Okay, now as you can see in this diagram, condition, and then if you have an exception, it goes into action, and an action can have 3 different levels. One is the summary level, then you have the detail level, and then you have the no exception level. Okay, now we will talk about each of these a little bit in details. So the summary, so it's basically one action. So one action for all exceptions. Okay, so again, I will use that example of that probation period or the users created. So if you define an alert, say for all the new user accounts created on a daily basis. Okay, so if you define the type as summary, what will happen is it will summarize all the user accounts that has been created and send one summary email, let's say, which is the most popular use or popular action that is performed using alerts. So it will summarize all the users and all the user accounts that got created, and it will send out that thing in an email. Now, this is very useful for semi-critical or informational scenarios, like list of terminated employees. Okay, so list of all the new hires on a given day. Okay, so basically what will happen is if there are 3 terminations or there are 10 users created, you're going to get one email summarizing all those actions, okay, or all those exceptions. Okay, so that's basically the summary. Now the detail, what that does is it performs one action per exception. So the exception in the example, like 10 users, the exception caught 10 users. Okay, it sent one email for all the exceptions. Okay, but a detail is one action per exception. So if it finds 10 user records created, it is going to send 10 emails. Okay, so that's basically the difference between the detail and the action, detail and the summary. So depending on the client requirements, you might choose which one to do. So like depending on the critical situation, you have to decide, or you have to ask the client what they want, and then accordingly build the alert to send a detailed email or a summary email. The next one is basically the no exception. The no exception is nothing but when it does not meet any of the exception criteria that has been built. So if you want to define that, okay, if on a particular date, if no user got created and that is considered as an exception, you want to send an email, oh, no users created today. So that will send out an email, and that will be classified as a no exception. So you basically you define your SQL statement, and then if the count is 0, right, that means no exception. So that is when you can define this particular action level, that no exception. Now we talked about actions, we talked about action levels. Now we're going to talk about action set. Now action set is basically multiple actions grouped together. Okay, you can have multiple action sets, and each action set can have different kind of action levels. So you can see that this first one has multiple actions and the levels are detailed. Okay, then the next one has multiple actions. It is an action set, but it has a different action level, which is the summary. The next one, again, it has multiple actions grouped into an action set, and you have no exception. So basically, within the same alert and in the same action set, that is how you can define. You can define a detailed, you can define a summary. So it is very flexible in that sense. Okay. So let's move on to the next one. So you can also like for the summary email, you can also do something called a summary threshold. So in the summary, we mentioned that we can, it will summarize all the exceptions and send out one emails. But like what if there are 50 new hires in a day? Okay, you don't want to make that email look like a clutter, right? So you can say, okay, I'm going to do a threshold of 10. So each email will contain 10 records. So otherwise, then email will be too long, and then the user might not go all the way to the end. So that's how you can do something called a summary threshold. Okay, and then what it will do is, you can see that if it is greater than 10, then you can say, okay, so if it is greater than 10, then it will go for a summary. If it is less than 10, then you can do a detail, which is like 10 different emails, right? So this is basically at what point you decide that, okay, when do I need a summary and when do I need a detail? You can define that threshold as well. Okay, so that's a summary threshold. So again, the next point is, so we talked so much about this emails, right? So this is the alert is going to send out emails to benefits, it's going to send out emails to HR, it's going to send emails to finance. But how does this email really work in Oracle Alerts? It uses Oracle's workflow engine to send out emails. Okay, so that is basically the technology behind sending out these emails. You can send out very nice looking HTML emails. You can send, you can put some basic tags and all. So all those, things that you can perform inside the email body. Okay. So basically, it uses the workflow mailer to send the email. The workflow mailer has to be configured in order to send these emails out of Oracle. Okay. So the next thing is something called a distribution list. So a distribution list is nothing but a group of users, okay, a group of recipients. So let's say I want to send an email to a group of 10 individuals. So I can, instead of each alert, instead of typing in 10 emails, and then if I have 10 different alerts, I've got to type those 10 emails 100 times. So the thing is, the beauty of using a distribution list is that you can create one distribution list. You can add all those emails, those 10 emails, into one distribution list, and then when you're creating the alert, you can, in the email, in the recipient, you can just select that distribution list instead of writing those 10 emails individually. So this is something that can be used, and it's often used, especially let's say for new hires. It goes to IT, it goes to HR, it goes to benefits, it goes to all different teams. So 5 or 6 different email accounts can be grouped, and you can create a distribution list. Okay. So that will conclude the basic information about alert from the presentation. Now what we will do is we will go to the application and see some of the screens so that we can have a better understanding of how this thing really works. Okay, so let's go to the application and see the screens for alerts so that we can better understand. Okay, so now we are in the application, and in order to see or define and configure alerts, you need to assign this responsibility called Alert Manager. Okay. Now I'm using the Vision instance, so it's called Alert Manager Vision Enterprises. If you are using this for your client, then you will see a responsibility. It is a seeded responsibility. You just need to assign that to your user, and you can define all the alerts and all the conditions and everything. So we will cover some of the screens. We will show some of the screens and setups that we already have, so that it will be more meaningful. We have seen the PowerPoint, we have talked a lot, but now let's see those things on the screen itself. So we talked about distribution list, so we can just take a look at the distribution list first. So I can just query, and you can see that the information that needs to be entered. So the application, for which module this is for. Okay, what is the name of this distribution list? You can put a description, and then you can add all the mail recipients. You have to put a space between one email account, and then you enter the next email account. That's how you enter all the email accounts. And as you can see that I have this option to put the two who are the main recipients. I have the CC who will be carbon copied on this, and I also have the BCC who will be blank copied. So if depending on the need, you can populate all three, and you can have multiple email accounts populated in the distribution list. Okay, so this is the distribution list. It's very simple, just the module name and the recipients. Okay, now we're going to open the actual alert screen, and we will define, and we will actually see some of the existing alerts so we can understand. So we will take a look at some of the periodic alert and also some of the event alerts to see. So I'm going to just do a wild query and see what we have. So the first one that I have, as you can see, this is an event alert. So this event tab, which is under which you will create an event based alert, and if it's a periodic alert, we're going to go to the other tab. So when we go to a periodic alert, we will see that. But for now, let's try to understand what is happening, what this alert is trying to do. Okay, the application, we have to select the application. So which module? So this is an application object library, which is the application developer or the sysadmin, that kind of activity. By looking at the alert, we can see that what it is trying to do and why this is the application. If you are trying to send emails for new hires, if you're trying to send emails for missing invoices, so then you have to use like human resource or Oracle Financials, so or AP or AR, depending on which module that you're using. Okay, and then I put the application name, I put the name of the alert, add user from name to workflow. Okay, so it's basically it's going to enter something. It's going to add some user from name to the workflow. Okay, that is the name. Okay, now the application is again the same, which is the application that we have selected on the top, and then the table name. So what am I going to do? So this is where I'm going to look for my criteria. What is the exception? What is like on which table there will be an insert or an update, whether this is a new record is getting created or a record is getting updated. Okay, so you have two options. So after insert means a new record has been inserted into the table. And then if you select the after update, that means a record has been updated. Depending on what your need is, you're going to select the option. Okay. You can also keep the history for these kind of things. That's how you can say, you know, keep the number of days. And then this is where you write your select statement. And then you can see that it's writing some basic select statement from, this is the select these two columns, display name, LR is the actually the alias, the display name, the name, notification ID, and it is inserting it into some variables. This is how the variables are written. It's an ampersand, which means that these are the variables for storing the queried columns. Okay, so I'm querying the display name, name, and notification ID. I need to store them somewhere. So I have an into the display name, ampersand display name, ampersand name, and ampersand notification ID. So I have the from which tables I need to query this from, and then I have my where condition. Okay, so this is basically what the query will do. So after an insert has happened, it will look for what was inserted. What was the display name that got inserted? What was the name that got inserted? And what was the notification ID that got inserted into this table? So every time there's an insert, it picks or it fetches these columns and it stores into some storage. Okay. Now, based on this, this is my condition. Now, after we talked about conditions, so some of the buttons here, so you can verify the query. So if your query has any issues, this verify will show you what the issue is. If the query is written correctly, it's going to say that the alert successfully parsed your SQL statement. Okay. And you can run. So what the run will do, it will basically run and give you the count. Okay, so I can just say run, and right now see it is giving 0 rows selected based on whatever criteria I have, because maybe there's nothing that has been entered into the table. Okay, so this is the first page. So this is where you define the alert name, the table. This is an event-based alert. So, and then let's just query and let's just move on. And if we try to find another alert, which is a periodic alert, so we can understand both. Okay, so this is a periodic alert. Okay, see the example that we talked about some table space. So this is a periodic alert, and you know, like it is going to check every day. Okay, the frequency is on day of the month. Okay, day 1 of the month. So every day, every first day of the month, it will check this, and the time, when is the time? It's at midnight. Okay, you have different frequency you can choose from. It's an on demand, on the day of the month, on the day of the week, in calendar days, in business days, every day, every other day, every business day. So you have all these different options that you can choose. Okay, and then you write your select statement, which is your condition, and then similarly you verify and everything, and then you can run and see if anything, if it returns any value. If the count is greater than 0, that means it has found an exception. Okay, so this is basically an example of a periodic alert. Now we will see the actions real quick. So you can see that there are 2 actions defined. And the first one is no exception, and the second one is a summary message, and the levels are no exception and summary. Okay, so it's going to send, if there's no exception, it has an action. If there is an exception, it has a summary action. Okay, you can click on action details and it will see what it will do. It's going to send an email to the ampersand email address. Okay, so basically this email address, it's going to find from a variable. Okay, that's why it has the ampersand email address. Okay, if it is a distribution list, you can select the list from here, and then it also has the functionality of a reply to, so that it also allows the users to take action based on that emails if you have a reply to. So I receive an email, then what? Okay, if I have a reply to, I can reply to that email and somebody will receive that reply. Okay, that response. Okay, So basically, this is the to, this is the subject line. You put a CC and the BCC. These options are also there. But if you're using a list, you don't need to. You have the print, and then this is where you put the text of that email. And you can also, choose a file that you want to, instead of this thing, you can also put a file, okay, instead of a text. Okay, so I will not save this. So the next one is a summary message. You can see that. So this is how you build the email body, and then that's about it. So you just prepare the email in the action. And then if you have any action sets, you can, you have to click on that action set to define the name, which is message to the DBA. And in the action set, you're going to select. So these are all the different inputs, okay? These are all the different inputs, and that can be used to send that emails out to the user, okay? So no exception message, no exception message, okay? Abort, summary message, and then summary message. So these are the different action sets. Summary message to DBA, and you can see that one of them is not enabled. So this is basically how you define the action sets, okay? And again, these are the different outputs. So you can see here, this is nothing but what you had stored in your ampersand variables. So you can see here the ampersand owner, ampersand table space, ampersand index name, extends, max extends. So all this information you can pull from the table, okay? And then based on that, you will define those actions, and you can club those actions into the action sets, okay? So we also have something called the response set. So if there's a response that you need to set up, that you can do a response set. And then you also see the alert details on the alert details tab. It opens, and you can see that the inputs. What are the inputs? The user, the Oracle username, the index name, and it also gives you the outputs. What are the different outputs? And then you can use this information. These are basically all the alert details. It's coming from all the queries that you have written, okay? So pretty much this is the main screen for defining alerts. And okay, I don't want to save this. And then finally, if you want, you can run the ad hoc, and you can schedule your alerts using this request schedule screen. And you can see that this program, and also if you want to submit something, you can check. And this is basically how you do the ad hoc or the on-demand sometimes if you want to learn. So you can select the application, you can select the alert, and you can start the alert. So this is mainly used for periodic alert, okay? So this is where you set, okay, from this date onwards, this alert is going to start, okay? And this will create a request ID. So this is basically submitting a concurrent program. What that concurrent program will do, it will check the alert information, and it will perform that action. So this is basically it. So we will also cover some simple demonstration alerts to show you how we can create a periodic alert and an event alert. So that we will cover that in a separate tutorial. So that will be all for this video. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to us, and we will be happy to answer. Thanks for watching.